it was like she was the real me, and I was the performance.
So I know that Femme was a short film, but can the two of you talk to me a little bit about the germ of the idea that became that short, and then how it became and blossomed into this beautiful feature film?
It was about genre to start off, really. Before we had characters and a plot and a story, Ping and I had this real desire. We've been friends for years, and we were housemates at the time, and we were in this real phase of watching kind of these late night neo noir crime thrillers and really kind of appreciating the genre, but also feeling kind of weirdly shut out of it as queer creatives. We didn't see ourselves represented in these films. If there are queer characters often that appear in them, they're very much pushed to the side, or they're there for comic effect. And so we felt quite energized, quite excited about the idea of trying to kind of kick that door down. I think we also felt maybe slightly frustrated that queer cinema sometimes is treated as if it's a genre of its own, and that there are very specific rules about the stories that we're allowed to tell and the style in which we are allowed to tell them. And we love those movies, but we also felt like we should be allowed to be expansive in our storytelling.
The most proximate film that inspired us was Good Time by the Safdie brothers. It was, like a one night romp through Queens, New York, and it was kind of like a hero slash anti-hero, trying to get himself out of trouble only to get into more trouble, and the tension of it ramps up over one night. The other one was Taxi Driver by Scorsese. We kind of saw the revenge thriller of the feature. The protagonist that Nathan plays was very much isolated by his trauma and goes on this lone odyssey of trying to reclaim power.
I think we have to talk about Aphrodite and that amazing entrance, which really is so arresting. And I think I just wanted to hear you talk to me a little bit about the physicality of Aphrodite, and then also then losing that and finding it in Jules, and sort of there's such an arc that you get to play here.
Yeah, it's funny you picked up on that, because that really was my the physicality and the duality of playing Jules and Aphrodite, then Jules in another situation with Preston. It wasn't a very verbose character. So in that sense, I knew that it was really, really important to tell the story through my body. And I think everything about Aphrodite I wanted to be very definite, very big, very confident, and full of love and joy. And I had decided that was Jules and Aphrodite's, most triumphant moment of his life to date. So when you see the characters meet in the newsagents and off license, that is a huge, huge fall, that ripping of character, of sense of self and identity, had to be the worst possible thing and come at the worst possible moment. And then the rest of the film, I spent a lot of time in fear, and just tried to kind of really be economic, I think, with how I moved through those scenes. I was thinking about someone that had been attacked and gone through that trauma, but being so physically close to the person that attacked them at any point in time, Preston could do something that would harm Jules. And I really was like, well, you must be economic, you must be small and quiet.
These are both characters who have they're very laconic, and they don't say a lot, even though Preston seems to use his language to sort of get away from what he's actually thinking. George, can you talk to us about sporting that very graceful tattoo and how you found your way into Preston?
Yeah, well, I've got Marie, our wonderful makeup and hair designer, to thank for that tattoo. And genuinely, both Marie and Bookie, our costume designer, completely expanded my vision of the character in terms of Sam and Ping's script is so beautifully nuanced and so taut, and there is so much of the character on the page. Preston is such a kind of peach of a role because there's so much nuance, there's so much kind of complexity, and yet his way of hiding that is in this almost kind of operatic way of being. I was thinking it was always scripted that he had a tattoo there, and I thought it'd be something kind of small, and I thought that maybe he hid in a sort of subtlety, a kind of an anonymity, and it was only sort of Marie and Bookie's interpretation of what that tattoo was. That was the first presentation was this huge collar. And it was like, oh wow, okay. And I suddenly realized, his his anonymity comes in sort of, there's so much peacocking, there's so much drag, sort of a drag king aspect to him. You don't even ask the question. It's not even in doubt. You know, I'm not under the radar. I'm sort of completely the opposite of this. And I only really fully understood that in putting and feeling how good it felt for the character to put on that sort of slightly more extreme aesthetic.
And I think that speaks to the title of the film, which I think cues us to this journey. But can we talk and expand about why Femme, which feels like such a weighted word, especially in the queer community, the way that it's hurled and the way that it's reclaimed? There's just a lot there.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's a big part of it. I think because we felt it's often, I mean, we have our own form of kind of toxic patriarchy within the queer community, and I think masc is often seen as being higher up the pecking order than femme. So I think we were excited by the idea of having a kind of femme character who like takes back power and goes on this revenge odyssey and sort of ends up on top. And it felt sort of wryly appropriate that it's a film is so much about masculinity. And I think we also like this idea of kind of referencing noir, I guess. The femme fatale, Jules kind of is the femme fatale, but this film is from the perspective of. And so Femme, I don't know, for multiple reasons, it's kind of felt like the perfect kind of punchy one-word title.
One of the things that I loved was there's a danger in every scene. And there's as Nathan was saying, like there's a moment where Preston could do something, but also that Jules could do something and could take us into very specific. What was the hardest or most challenging sort of scene to write to make sure that you were taking us on a journey where you would feel unsafe, but in very safe narrative territory?
Stumped.
Yeah.
It's true. It's a Q&A question we've never had before, which is quite rare.
Yeah.
What as they're thinking of it, there's one thing just about, you know, I didn't write it, but like in terms of, let me answer this one, guys. No, but just in terms of how much sort of subtleties in the writing, there's stuff like, there's a bit where I kind of get road rage in the car, and it sort of comes out of nowhere. That was totally placed. That was always part of the scene. And these moments of ratcheting up tension and setting up the unexpected is all the brilliance of Sam and Ping's writing, because that looks like, oh shit, that's like a kind of like, hey, I'm walking here kind of moment, which apparently was improvised. That's, you know, Sam and Ping made Nathan and I look very good with the accuracy of their writing.
We're always looking for ways to subject either Jules or Preston or both to some form of danger. And because the film is so much about identity being threatened, be it, you know, your sense of masculinity or your sense of being a powerful drag queen or your sense of safety or your sense of self, you know, as Nathan was talking about, you know, being Aphrodite, you feel so powerful and regal, that sense that, you know, power is part of your identity. So, you know, we're always looking for situations that can be put together in a coherent narrative arc, situations that will threaten your sense of identity or safety.
Yeah, and there is a sort of fragmented identity that's happening in both of you. And I wanted to ask the two of you, that must have been hard to play, because even at the end you're wondering, where are these allegiances and where is the love lying, and how much of it was a performance and how much of, and the fact that we end the film and you're sort of left with this, I think it's a testament to both of your performances, because you're playing so many levels at the same time. But I can't imagine that had been very simple.
No, thank you. I think that obviously Jules is completely disempowered and completely stripped, but gains power by forming a new identity. So I think there was something going on with that. There were just different levels of which to play on that. And I remember the video game scene. I just enjoyed it so much. It became my favorite scene, and it was because Jules had blossomed as a new character. But it was really about levels, and I think we filmed the date scene on the first day, and I think you on the day were playing with levels of how much do you reveal, how much do you hide, what's actually going on, and we had to kind of really be very specific about that, and I felt that I had to be really specific about when Jules was at 100 and when Jules was like, okay, I'm going to be here and I'm going to hold it, and that was really interesting. It was very, very hard to play. It was hard because everything was very measured, but I watched George a lot, I think that was my job. I think in a sense of where Jules is within that dynamic. He had to be so aware of what Preston was doing, which made it a little bit easier as an actor because I could just watch George and then go from there.
Yeah, and for me, there's so much to echo Nathan. I watched Nathan a lot because so much of like Preston is sort of, not just because Nathan is so brilliant, but like just because, Preston is always checking. Like, is this working? Is this working? Is this what you? I think this is what you want, so I'm going to give you it. So he's always kind of like. Although he'd never say it himself, looking for validation in the other one. It's like, are you getting scared right now? Good. Or are you getting excited right now? Good. So it's always watching that. It's like a sort of boxer, kind of how is this combination working on you? And then the journey of him is actually, he sort of blossoms. And again, Nathan said something about drag when we've been talking about this, that it's not like a separate armor, the kind of other identities they have. What's fascinating and more intriguing as an actor, that it's a legitimate part of them. That sort of slightly more toxic, stereotypical masculinity is part of Preston as well. It just doesn't tune with this other part of him. And so I kind of felt like his journey was a sort of retraction of one part and a blossoming of another.
So thank you again for this conversation today, and thank you all for coming here this weekend. Yes,
Thank you very much.
Round of applause for everyone involved.
Thank you.
Thank you all.